Hey, all, got a great episode for you today. Miss Tegan Dowler talking about an important topic of diversity and inclusion and the outcomes we get of this and the great things it achieves in relation to enterprise excellence. Let's not hold up anymore. Let's get into this great show. Hope you enjoy it.
Welcome to the Enterprise Excellence Podcast, where we share knowledge from global experts in how to create high-performance, agile cultures of continuous improvement and innovation. Cultures where employees wake up smiling and excited to go to work and make a difference. Cultures where leaders feel they have the time to proactively serve the growth of themselves and others.
I'm your host, Brad Jevons, coming to you from Brisbane, Australia. By improving our organisations, we create a better future for generations to come. An economy where our children and grandchildren can experience the joy of owning their first home. An environment where they can enjoy holidays on clean beaches and marvel at the beauty of nature. A future where they feel safe, respected, and empowered to make a difference at work, bringing that energy home to their families and communities. This show is proudly brought to you by the Enterprise Excellence Community and Group, which is focused on helping organisations create this better future through this podcast, our community where you can engage with global experts, tour best practice sites, and also our workshops focused on the most important topics to truly help your organisation improve into the future for those it serves. Visit enterpriseexcellencegroup.com.au to learn more. Welcome to episode 205 of the Enterprise Excellence Podcast.
It is such a pleasure to have Miss Tegan Dowler on the show with us today. Tegan's purpose is to make workplaces better and help people perform at work. Tegan has a background in psychology and organisational change within heavy industry and most recently manufacturing. Tegan is with us today to discuss the important topic of inclusive workplaces, particularly within industry. Let's get into the episode. Tegan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Brad. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, looking forward to the chat. So, Tegan, why is inclusion so important to you?
I think for me, I've always been someone who, when I see something that's not working as well as it could, I've always been motivated to want to improve, to change. I'm that annoying person that when you come and talk about a problem, I want to solve the problem, which can be great in some circumstances, not so great in others. Just ask my husband. But I think the real reason that I am so passionate about inclusion in heavy industry is from a lived experience of myself. So I began in heavy industry when I was, oh goodness, 18, 20, around that age. And as a young woman in those heavy environments, sometimes in my early 20s, I was the only woman in a team or on a site even. It made me start to question about my own value of being there, my worthiness of being there, my capability. And I actually thought that I wasn't cut out for it. I wasn't tough enough or smart enough or actually able to um, contribute as fully that I had wanted to. And so I actually thought I was going to leave the industry. I thought, oh well, not for me. And then because of the role I had at the time, I had been working in the people space. I had other people coming up to me and actually sharing their own experiences. I had women coming and talk to me about supervisors that would let the male site engineer drive the car on site, but she wasn't allowed, or about, harassment, discrimination. And it really lit this fire in me because I saw a problem and I wanted to fix it. And I thought that as an industry, we could be doing so much better so that we could actually get better as an industry. And what I ended up doing, as you did 20 years ago when you had something to say, you wrote a blog. And my business actually began as a blog, Brad. And I remember distinctly telling two of my mentors, two male mentors of mine, my idea. My idea was to just talk openly and freely about the experiences of women, some of the challenges that they may have encountered in heavy industry, but make it very solution focused. Talk about some of the strategies that others had used that have worked, share my own experiences. And upon explaining to them my idea, they looked at me in shock and said, do not do that. That is career suicide.
Ah,
And it was a really defining moment for me, Brad, because I sat there and I thought, wow, if we as an industry think that we're tough and we're straight talking and we can, get to the straight to the point, if we can't be honest and look at ourselves in the mirror, then I don't want to be a part of an industry like that. I found it very hypocritical. So I
Mm.
remember sitting at the kitchen table with my little blog ready to go, and it was a very pivotal career moment when I pressed go live on that blog. And
Yeah.
that day it grew and was discovered and it turned into a business. So I've had the pleasure of being able to work with many people, individuals, organizations to help them shift their culture in their workplaces, and particularly to help really enable workplaces to open up their idea of the best person for the job or cultural fit so that they can access greater talent and greater innovation.
Well, it's great, Tegan, and I'm glad you did that. Like, you think of what you've done and others that has really shifted an industry a long way. Like, it's certainly not perfect, but boy, it's come a long way from 20 years ago, hasn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's been really beautiful to reflect on that 20 years. And the women that I work with still, in some pockets, they are still experiencing the challenges that were around for me in my early career days. But there's been so much growth. And through that, I'm very optimistic that companies are now also really leveraging the value of all their team members.
Hmm. I guess too, Tegan, it's probably important for our listeners who have never been to one of our mine sites or one of our heavy industry. Like, you go back to 20 years ago when you were there.
Yeah.
Can you describe to the listeners what are some of the differences that they would see now from what was going on 20 years ago? Even just some of the more, yeah, I'll let you cover a few.
Some of the practical observations. Well, I suppose there's probably less adult magazines, less adult calendars that are around compared to 20 years ago. I distinctly remember fronting up at a big pre-start meeting on a big major construction project, and I was in the sheds, and there was probably 100 or so people in there ready to go off to work, and I noticed that they had the adult magazines on the table, and I unfortunately the supervisor turned to me and said, "Oh, Tegan, do you have anything to add?" Did I have something to add to that conversation? And I asked them, the group, to remove them by the time morning tea came, and an official complaint was put in because of me doing that.
An
So
official complaint on you was put in back then.
correct, correct. So
How we've changed. Thank
how they've
goodness.
changed, I know. So the back 20 years ago, there was a fight to keep the adult magazines in the crib room. Things like that. I suppose also, a little bit less than 20 years ago, I was working in underground coal, and that was probably the hardest environment I've worked in as a woman. There was very few women who worked underground, and in fact, it was illegal for women to work underground up until 1986, I believe, in this country. So you would go to a pre-start and stand there amongst the crew and be the only female and have comments being made and sexual innuendo as you're going down the drifty and the incline and all those sorts of situations which really either directly or indirectly let you know that you are not welcome here and they're
Mm.
different. And I've seen a real shift from that now. Now it's not even a second thought. There's so many other women in industry at the moment, and those sorts of behaviors are on the whole not acceptable.
Mm. I know my main experiences with BHP, and in most areas now I'm seeing nearly 50-50 male female, and the females. Like, I remember once I said to a bloke, whenever I did a review at a site, I'd always go, "Hey, would you want your daughter to work here?" And I remember one bloke said to me, "Oh, Brad, 10 years ago, no way, mate." But yeah, now she does. Like, and I want my granddaughter to work here.
Yeah,
And that's amazing. It's such a big effort
yeah.
to shift a culture like that, but they did so well.
And you reference BHP because they were quite very disruptive, I would say, in the goal that they set for themselves oh, how many years ago was it now? It would 8 to 10 years ago, I would say. So I was on a BHP site working as a contractor at that point, and I was when the announcement got made, and when I was coaching one of the supervisors, and he was a drill and blast supervisor, and let's just call him Joe for anonymity's sake. And we're driving in the pit, and Joe goes to me, Tiggs, what do you reckon about this 50-50 stuff? I don't care. I don't care what you look like, where you're from, who you are. I just want you to come here and work hard. And Joe didn't know the other type of work that I did in the diversity and inclusion space. And I said, well, Joe, let me ask you this. And I knew at home he had daughters, he had a wife. And I said, are you the same guy at work as you are at home with your wife and daughters? And he goes, no, no, I'm not. And I said, well, imagine if you could be. And for me, the whole point of this conversation of diversity, of the focus on inclusion, is literally that people feel safe to come to work as who they are and they don't have to cover. And I said, Joe, you don't have to be the tough drill and blast supervisor giving pineapples left and right, being the tough guy. You can actually come and just be who you are. And he goes, oh yeah, I guess so. All right. But the big disruptive focus that BHP created or announced created change in the industry. And we know change is not always easy, and we know we make mistakes in change, absolutely. But I don't think anyone could deny how disruptive they've been of the industry. From a
No, and the results it's given them too.
That's right. I should say
Yeah, and the
disruption is
results it's given
that.
them too.
The
Yeah,
results were
because it's
amazing.
also got them dramatic results. Yeah,
Yep. And you
yeah. I
compare,
think their whole excellence journey. Yeah, I think their whole excellence journey has been supported by it because it's created this culture of respect and it's helped really enhance that at the same time as they've been really amping up their excellence journey. I think the two have worked so well hand in hand.
I think it's a wonderful call out because to get to excellence, one of the aspects from my perspective is the requirement to challenge the status quo, to look at things differently and to be willing to do things differently. And when you bring people in with difference, that is a beautiful byproduct that enables you to access that excellence.
Mm. Yeah, I often look at it and I go, look, if there's not a foundation of respect, it is hard to do anything in relation to excellence. And inclusion is about respect, isn't it? And bringing your normal self to work and being able to just be yourself that you are with your family is like that's the ultimate of respect too. Tegan, it is a hard journey and it takes a lot of effort. But how can organizations go about improving inclusion? What would you say are some key things they can do to start
Yeah.
or keep improving their journey they're already on?
Look, off the back of what you say about respect, I think that is a cornerstone of an effective, high-performing team. We know that, trust and respect. And often what I had seen historically in the conversation in this topic, in this area, is there was a lot of focus on let's respect people coming in. And that's important. That's valid. But what happened accidentally was that people who were already in the business didn't feel as respected. And so, what we saw early days, and in some pockets still, we do see a lot of discomfort and a lot of pushback about the concept. And, Brad, this space that we work in, the inclusion, the diversity place, it's such a unique space that's different than any other operational improvement, any other leadership development. Those things sort of sit outside of yourself as an individual. They're kind of add-ons. They're nice to have. They're skill acquisitions. When we start to talk about diversity and inclusion, it is deeply personal because it starts to talk about the very ideology of who I am, how I identify, how I interact with the world, how everyone else interacts with me, my place in the world. And that is a very unique place to discuss in an organizational setting. And as such, it can be a very emotional topic and of recent date, a very political topic. And so I think the number one thing that organizations can do if they're wanting to go down this journey is just firstly acknowledge that. Acknowledge that this is a really sensitive space and have empathy for people's experience and their interpretation of what's occurring for them. I think respecting the needs of individuals who are going through the experience is important, but also recognition that there's no one way to do it. You know, I always say there's no golden bullet to getting an inclusive culture because every company is unique. And so to that point, ensuring that if you are starting on the journey or you are wanting to continue to evolve towards a matured, inclusive culture, firstly recognizing what your current status is, understanding where you are now, how your people are feeling now, what kind of history exists within your business as well. Understand, and then once you've got that good current state, then understanding where you want to go. Because there's a lot of great initiatives, and we can use the very disruptive announcement that BHP had of the initially 50-50 and then the re-communication of the 40-40-20 with the 20 flex in the middle.
Yeah.
Really understanding, is that actually what we want for our business? Do we as a business need to have these, you know, big pillar initiatives? Does it make strategic sense for us as an organization? Is it actually going to align with what we're wanting to do operationally? So this discussion around an inclusive culture should be intrinsically linked with where you want to take your business operationally. What's the strategic objectives? Because the way I see the inclusive culture work is that's the grease on the cogs. So with your business, you've got all your value drivers and you're looking at them towards your objectives, but the culture is the grease in my perspective. So making sure that there's deep alignment. And then once you've got that clarity, you've created your gap analysis, you've got your current status, you've got your future status, and then really looking at, well, what are the actions that we need to take that's going to get us there? What kind of support do we have from senior leadership? What kind of support do we need to give to our leaders down the chain who will be responsible for rolling out these initiatives? And then what kind of resources are available? Do we commit money behind these initiatives? Do we have dedicated resources? These are some of the big considerations that companies need to determine early on to set up their inclusive culture strategy most effectively.
So Tegan, I really get it. It's like understand your current state now, where are you at? And then strategically what's important to your business now, which I'm guessing there could be many aspects of that. Like could even be an aspect of, well, we need a more broad workforce for the future. Like what are we going to do? What's the root cause of that? It could be culture. And the other factor then is create an action plan to really be able to bring it through and make it happen. Which I guess if you got that strategic alignment, at least then the action plan or the projects you're doing are then part of your strategic execution. So it's that whole key part of making it happen, I guess, and your measures.
Absolutely.
Tegan, what are some techniques you've seen companies do to understand their current state? Actually look into where are we currently at?
Yeah, great question. So employee surveys are often a big starting point where you can get some data looking at what's the experience of our employees. You know, being mindful though, not to give survey fatigue with constantly drilling your people for their feedback. Then you can start to look at some of your indicators in terms of retention. What's your turnover? What are the numbers like there? Cut and slice it in terms of key demographics to understand. Same as your succession planning. So, who is attending development programs? Who is targeted on your high performing list? And again, cut and slice, look at if you've got any themes. You can also look into, there is a tool that has been put together by Manufacturing Skills Queensland. It's called the Workplace Gender Diversity Assessment Tool. And that's a maturity assessment tool that I put together for MSQ to help organisations answer some key questions about 10 different elements from their recruitment practices, from their inclusive leadership, their culture, their gender action plan, and they can answer the questions and get plotted on a maturity curve to get a great pictorial idea of where they're at. And then from there, strategies fall out for organizations to consider as recommendations for how they then might integrate to an action plan to move up the maturity curve.
That's nice. That then also helps them bolt into the strategic piece too, as they're strategically planning.
But
Dan, what have you seen some companies' strategic objectives be that then drives a real focus on inclusion? What have you seen sort of fall out? Right, we've got this strategic objective, right? Inclusion's the lever we got to pull.
what I'm tending to see in organizations at the moment is they are spending a lot of time trying to increase attraction. So, with the work I do historically with the Queensland Government, created for them a toolkit, a Women in Manufacturing Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion toolkit, which has got 50 different strategies that companies can implement regarding their attraction, the recruitment, the retention, and the career development of women in their organization. What I'm seeing is a big focus area for most organizations, particularly in the manufacturing space, is the attraction piece. So most are integrating strategic objectives regarding attraction and recruitment. Other other sectors and other industries are looking now at that next stage, the retention piece. So how are we developing our leaders, the inclusive to have an inclusive leadership style? How do we give them the tools to be able to manage that, the diversity that's coming in, as well as looking at some aspects around their career progression. So then we've say in mining, predominantly construction, a little bit. They've gotten greater numbers of women into the business, but the next frontier is how we elevate them up the hierarchy into positions
Mm.
of formal power and leadership.
Yeah, it's the journey, isn't it? Because there's many aspects to inclusion, isn't there? There's one, getting into the organization. There's two, what happens once you're in the organization.
That's
You
right.
know, you look at those senior leadership teams and what is their makeup? And yeah, it's a very good point. Tegan, what would be your enterprise excellence 2 minute tip for a company in relation to this topic of inclusion? What would you say? Look, this is what I'd recommend.
Well, it's a really hard question to answer, Brad, because every organization is very different in what their journey is. But in terms of a broad statement, I always come back to our why. Why is this an important space? What is the purpose of this conversation or this focus area? Because what I've seen happen in this journey is that companies will start out with the intention to bring in more diversity, to work on their inclusive culture. And they'll go out, there'll be a little group that'll be all pumped and very motivated and excited about it. And then they'll hit some roadblocks. And without a really clearly articulated why, it falls over because we know that when we go
Mm,
through hard times, if we don't have purpose, we don't have resilience, and then we revert to whatever's comfortable. Our brain is seeking that comfort homeostasis. So for me, my excellence tip for companies wanting to focus on creating greater cultures of inclusion is to really understand the purpose, the why behind that, because it may get hard.
yeah, it's a great point, T, and I totally agree. Without any sort of system having that clear purpose, once you hit the roadblocks, you typically will divert back. So true. Tegan, what's been a recent insight for you in this topic or others?
Yeah. So it's probably not a very recent insight, as in the last few months insight, but I would say it's been a very pivotal realization through my journey in this space. So, as I mentioned to you, I began my focus from a lived experience, from being very passionate around improving the experiences for people in the workplace. And I see a lot of people in that space as well. What was a big insight for me is through the early stages of that work and hitting those roadblocks and getting frustrated and wondering why this is happening was the realization that the roadblocks are coming generally from fear. And
Mm,
so once I started to realize that people are not genuinely, usually, are not intentionally trying to hurt others, to be rude, to be difficult, but rather they're their behavior is coming from their own internal concerns, their own fear around, well, where do I fit now? How do I feel included? I now have new competitors coming into my workplace. What does that mean for my career progression and my long-term view of what I thought my working life would look like? These are really big conversations that stir up a lot of concern and worry. And when people are fearful or concerned, you get all sorts of behaviors coming out. So having empathy for that experience of people has been really pivotal for my conversations and the work that I do in organizations now.
It's a great point, isn't it? Our fear frames in life drive so many behaviors that can seem untoward or totally untoward, but there is always a basis of where that's coming from, isn't it?
Yeah, there was a beautiful quote, sorry to add to that, Brad, but it's around people aren't doing things against you, they're just doing things for themselves.
Mm, yeah. It's that, and these topics of inclusion have such a bigger picture to them, don't they? But they are a longer term thing. And I guess it comes back to what you said earlier. Purpose is so important because without that purpose to keep you going for the longer term, probably the fear frames are gonna win out in a lot of cases. So
Such a shame because we know the benefits are huge. The business case around having a greater inclusive culture, more diversity coming in, it's been done. The business case has been sold in terms of innovation, financial performance, able to attract top talent. These are all great things that companies need now to compete in a really tight job market for top talent.
yeah. Tegan, I see it like if I come into a company myself and I'm helping them build a greater continuous improvement or agile organization, if there's a baseline of respect and diversity, their journey is so much faster because all you're doing is people are more willing to change too. They're more willing to adopt new systems and new approaches with that baseline. But if
Definitely.
you come in and there's a culture of disrespect and lack of trust and a lack of diversity, you got it's like you literally can't do it. You've got to get that baseline right before you can do much. And I guess that's why we see so many failed programs throughout our world where people try to do transformations, but without that solid baseline, they typically won't work.
I love that. You can throw any fancy initiative at it, but
Tegan,
unless you've got that culture, it's going to fail, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. It just people won't have the motivation to board and they won't feel the desire to anyway. So yeah, and it's often, I guess, we win or lose at the front line too, which is another key aspect of it. Hey Tegan, how can people reach out to you if they want to engage and get help and learn more?
Yeah, sure. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Tegan Dowler. I'm also on Instagram under the handle the BCW, as well as via email, Tegan, Teagan, at thebcw.com.au.
Great, Tegan. Well, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and everything you have done and continue to do to help us create a better future. I really appreciate it, Tegan.
Thanks so much, Brad. I appreciate the chance to talk.
Cheers. Bye for now. What a great episode. Remember, you can go to the Enterprise Excellence Group website to be able to get hold of additional resources on this topic and information. There were two key takeaways for me from this episode. The first was the element of respect that diversity and inclusion can bring to an organisation. When we really lean into it, that aspect of respecting every individual and the flow-on effects that brings throughout the company, which can enhance culture, enhance buy-in, enhance engagement, and really drive performance. The other key element for me was the importance of integrating this into strategy. So it's a key part of our strategy, which you then deploy and create as a key focus across the whole organisation to truly move it forward and achieve outcomes towards that path or that objective and vision for this important topic. It's great to see how all these systems just connect together to truly help a company achieve enterprise excellence with a focus on whatever's important for them right now. Thanks again for your time and knowledge, Tegan. Really enjoyed the episode. Bye for now.